Welcome to the show, Gary. We're live. We're live in the deal room. How are you doing?
Good, man. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Love talking with the experienced real estate investors who've got a diverse experience and background doing deals. But for this show, we're actually breaking down individual deals and just going through the entire process, helping folks understand all the way from how did you find the deal to how did you end up making money on the deal, what the lessons were learned along the way. So welcome to the show. But before we get there, like, how did you even get started in real estate? Actually, I want to step back one step further. Before you started considering real estate investing, what were you doing?
So I had been involved in the oil and gas industry. At the time that I got into real estate, I was the senior vice president for an engineering and processing company. Um, but along the way, just like most people, I read a lot of books on how to become wealthy. And one of the things that I found in those books, it was a common theme that like 7 out of every 10 millionaires made their money through real estate. So for years and years, I'd always had the intention of getting into real estate at some point. And then in 2016 or 17, a good friend of mine who was an agent on the retail side, he and I were talking, and he told me that he was considering getting into the investment side of the business, and he kind of laid out what that meant. Which, to be honest, I didn't understand it at all when he started talking to me. I had no concept of what flipping houses or wholesaling or any of that kind of stuff was. So he and I started talking. I asked him, would you ever consider having a partner? So he, and we'd been friends for quite a while. We had actually worked together in a different business at one point, and he said, absolutely. And so he and I started the real estate investment journey together. And luckily, he actually knew 3 or 4 real estate investors who were really successful in the business and were kind enough to be willing to sit down with us and literally lay out what the business is, how to generate leads, everything, so that we could put a plan together and get started in the business.
Love it, love it. So you're out there seeking help, knowing that you probably can't do everything yourself, or at least if you did, you may not be able to do it as well as if you had a partner. But also seeking expert advice to learn the things that you don't know. But was there a breaking point before you got to where, all right, I need to really figure out this real estate game?
A breaking point. I don't know that there was a break. Well, I guess the friend of mine who was going into the business, when he told me, he and I had the conversation, and he told me, I felt like this had been something I'd been thinking about doing for many years. And this jumped out to me as maybe this is the opportunity. Not maybe, I thought, man, this is probably going to be my best opportunity to get into the business with somebody who has knowledge and, more importantly, knows people who are successful in the business so that they could help us put a plan together. I mean, you know the deal. You're the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with the most. And I thought, man, if he has the connections to be able to surround us with 3 or 4 people that really know the business, I mean, how can you not take advantage of that opportunity?
Did you have any fears and doubts making that jump?
Absolutely, man. Anytime you do anything new, there's always a underlying fear. When I got into the oil and gas industry, the when I first got into it, I remember thinking to myself, what if I fell at this? That's always a question anytime you do anything new. But all you can do is put the best plan in place and, take the leap. And the best thing to do, luckily I'd learned over my career in business, is you talk to the best people, have them show you what they've been doing. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Do what other successful people have done to become successful, and you'll be successful. And that's worked for me and everybody else in the world, every time anybody's ever succeeded at anything.
Yeah, I love that, especially with real estate, because real estate it's a fairly simple business once you know how to do it. And the best way to succeed at it, at least with the fewest amount of bumps and bruises, is to just take what someone who already has figured it out, take their business model, take what they do, and just copy it. Now the trick is obviously knowing who to trust, and it seems like you knew someone who was a real estate professional. You did trust him, and then you also got some additional together. You got some additional advice and expertise to help you along the way. So let's check this deal out here. Share my screen. All right. Remember that one?
I do.
It was a good deal, and you sent me over these pictures, and I was cycling through, and was like, "Yep, that walking into a room like that, a property like that, I love it because I see the opportunity everywhere. Also, I see the pain that the particular the seller, the homeowner, probably has with this property, which is the reason why they reached out. So." Or actually, how did you find this specific deal?
One of my lead channels is direct mail. I ran a list. I think this happened to be a probate list, and sent out letters. And this was one of the letters that responded. One of the leads that responded from a letter.
Love it. And I didn't ask you that before, but when I was looking at this, it screamed inherited home. That's what it looked like to me, having walked, probably 1,000 properties by this point. That's what that looked like. So what stood out about this deal? Like once it came across your desk, you had this conversation with whoever's in charge of the estate or inherited the property. What stood out that this might be a potential deal?
The fact that it was in such rough shape. Man, I can tell you that all of the deals that I've made the best money on are the ones that are in the worst shape, because typically the homeowner doesn't know what to do. It looks like, for most people, when they see a property in this shape, in their mind, they're thinking tear down. But, so somebody in that frame of mind, if they can get something in the realm of what they think is decent money, they're completely happy. So the fact that it was in such rough shape is what gave me an indication that there's likely a pretty good opportunity here.
Yeah, especially with inherited homes, because although in some certain depends on the situation, they may have lived there before, or they may know the home, or they may have walked the property when it was in its best, when it was in its prime. But at this point, I'm just going to share the screen again. Someone walking this property, if you inherited this property, they're looking at a Mount Everest. Like they're at the bottom, and it may not look like a lot to most people, but this is a huge project for anyone, but it's a Mount Everest of a project if you don't know what you're doing. And that's going to take a lot of time, energy, and then in the case of an inherited property, a lot of times a lot of emotion to see this through. So were there any red flags that when you're out there, you're walking the property, were there any red flags that just popped up that you want to at least pay attention to before you can make your offer?
Are you talking about in regards to condition?
Yeah.
Okay. There were a couple of things that I hadn't dealt with before. And like you, I've probably walked, I don't know, just say around 1,000 homes. And so I'm not saying I'm the most experienced guy out there, but I have some experience. But what I noticed is there's a huge oak tree in the front yard, and the roots had actually grown under the driveway that was out to the right side. I could tell that the foundation was off pretty substantially. And I was suspecting that it was because of the roots from the huge oak tree in the front yard. Now, I've dealt with homes before where you need to cut roots and provide a root barrier. But my concern was, if all these roots are under the house, is it possible to pull those roots out so that you can fix the foundation? So I actually called Brant with Wealth Passage. Brant has tremendous experience when it comes to, well, everything real estate, but especially on the construction side. So I called him, talked with him about that. And, he said that obviously it can be dealt with. So we got Gerard, the foundation engineer, to come out, have a look at the property. And basically what Gerard said was, the roots are going to be a problem, because even if you cut the roots, put a root barrier in, it's not likely you're going to be able to pull enough to be able to actually get the front of the house to drop because of those roots. So you would have to account for the fact that the house in the front is probably not going to drop, which that was one of the issues. The front of the house was high. So you would actually have to put basically take the foundation up from around the entire house so that you can bring everything back up to level. So it was the first time I'd ever dealt with that type of situation before. So that was a concern. And there were a few other concerns. There wasn't a clean out, subsurface plumbing clean out. So it was difficult to check the subsurface plumbing, because another concern was with those roots growing through there, as you know, and with the foundation being that bad, the roots could have grown through the subsurface plumbing and cracked those, or just they could have been cracked from the foundation being in such bad shape. So there were quite a few questions related to tree roots, foundation, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, good job there getting the foundation engineer. So, in the Houston area, Gerard, he's a structural engineer that a lot of real estate investors use to get out and just check from an engineering perspective, check the foundation and give you an expert's opinion on its current situation and how to fix it, versus a foundation company, which, at least in Houston, anyone can start a foundation company.
Right.
Doesn't really require any special licensing, which means if you get 5 different companies out there to give you a quote, you'll get 5 different, answers and bids on how to solve the problem. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the structural, the right way to solve the problem. So that's what a structural engineer does. And I've had Gerard come out to properties before that I was certain, based on my non-expert opinion, would need foundation work. And he's like, no, you need to cut that tree down and that'll solve your problem. And my sister-in-law, she actually had one. There was this huge crack in the front of her house. And so I was like, yeah, give Gerard a call. So he goes out there and tells her, like, no, you need to put a root barrier here, and then make sure you're watering your lawn on a regular basis. And then in about a year, that gap will close. And she called me and she was like, he was right. Like, it closed up. And then I've also had other situations where I thought maybe it didn't need it. And then Gerard's like, no, you need to put pilings here, 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 and here. And I love that advice. So I wanted to, hang out there a little bit longer so folks don't make that mistake.
Let me give you a different property, but this was about 6 months ago. There was a property in Huffman, Texas that I walked the property. I thought for sure it needed foundation work. I called Gerard. They were super busy. He wasn't going to be able to have anybody come out for 4 or 5 days. So I went ahead and got 2 foundation companies out there, and the bids were $9,000 and $12,000. Gerard came and looked at it and said that there is no foundation work needed. The issue was when they poured the foundation, somehow it was poured in a way where the concrete was elevated off somehow. So all that was needed, and I don't even understand how that could happen. But long story short, he said the foundation was within tolerance. They just needed to come back in and basically put the self leveler in, which cost $1,200. And so it took me from $9,000 or $12,000 to $1,200. So knowing who the right people to call to get something checked out is extremely important.
Yeah. And you knew two of them. You knew Brant,
Yeah,
and
right.
then you knew Gerard. So, um, what would you end up negotiating to get this deal? Because it needs a lot of work. They know
Mhm,
that. They
mhm.
obviously wanted a simpler solution. So, how'd you end up negotiating this deal?
Well, so one of the because of my work history in engineering, I tend to be an analytical thinker. So when I work or negotiate with engineers, it's actually kind of easy for me because I put the facts and figures together, go through, show them how everything works out. And most of the time, the engineer minded folks, as long as the facts and figures make sense, they're pretty much in agreement. So luckily, the guy I was working with, he actually, the executor of the estate lived in Seattle, so he wasn't even local, but he was a software engineer. So I basically put the numbers together, what I expected it would sell for, what all the repairs were going to be, and what my profit margin needed to be, and then laid it out. And my original offer was like 125 ish, something like that. And he came back, and his sister was involved. And um, anyway, the sister was hoping for more, so he just asked me, man, is there any way you can do 130? If you can do 130, then my sister would be happy with everything and we can move forward. And I agreed. And so that's kind of how that negotiation went.
Awesome. Yeah, let's share that screen here. All right. So turning this property right here into a front end purchase price, 130,000. So you already knew what the challenge was with the rehab. You already knew what was involved there. You're able to get this deal negotiated. When you first were negotiating this deal, were you thinking that I'm going to rehab it, or were you thinking, hey, I might rehab it, but I also might consider wholesaling it, or maybe even holding it as a rental, or selling it via owner's finance down the road?
I consider all of those. So anytime I walk into a deal, I look at all three, whether I'm going to flip it myself, whether it's a potential lease, or whether it's going to be a wholesale deal. And in this particular instance, the rent rate didn't justify with the value of the property. The numbers just didn't work for a rental. So I knew either I would flip it or I would wholesale it. So I worked the numbers based on what I would need to flip it if I were going to flip it myself. But typically, if I'm going to flip it, if I think there might be an opportunity to get 20 or $30,000 on a wholesale deal versus the potential of $40,000, give or take, on a flip, I'll always market it out just to see where the wholesale market is. And in this instance, you know, uh, I was able to earn a $30,000 wholesale fee, so it made sense for me to just move forward with that method without,
Yeah. And so I want to break down a couple of really important points you said there. So multiple exit strategies, you're thinking that on the front end, which is vital, because if you go in with just a single exit strategy, in the case of, like, say, flipping, and for some reason that doesn't work, whether it's market or you were just off on your repairs or off on your value or whatever, it puts you in a bad spot. Knowing that you could rent it or wholesale it or sell it owner's finance and still have a successful deal is so important, and that really protects your downside. So you went in knowing that, hey, I can flip this thing. I've got the numbers to do it, but might be able to wholesale it and make most of my profit.
Correct. That's exactly right. You've always got to have multiple strategies. I I can't think of a deal that I've entered into without having multiple exit strategies.
I can think of a couple that I did. They didn't turn out well. Which it's those things like, I know what I should do, and there were times in 200 something flips where I saw an opportunity and I decided to deviate from my own rules.
That's right.
And that's also, why when I learned like touching a hot stove is not a smart idea. So stop doing that. And then finally I was really like, all right, Chris, stop being an idiot. Like follow the rules and you don't lose money. So I eventually learned.
Right, 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 right.
Is there anything you would do differently about this one?
The things I would do differently, I
And
probably.
here's the back end. So I say 160 here. It's actually 165.
Mhm.
So that's roughly $35,000 gross profit, and then you had some closing costs, or did you pass that along to the end buyer?
In this instance, so um, I, I have a buyer's list that I'll market the property out to myself. But if my buyers aren't interested at the value that I'd like to get on a wholesale deal, I have a dispositions manager that I will give the property to, and he'll dispo it or attempt to dispo it on a wholesale deal. And my agreement with him is 20% of the wholesale fee. So that 5,000 ish dollars went to him.
Okay. So yeah, you've got your VIP list, and then if it doesn't work for them, you've got this extra. So basically, you got three exit strategies. You can flip it. You got your VIP wholesale, and then you've got your dispo wholesale guy.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Love it, love it. All right. So was the end buyer, was he going to flip it, or was he going to hold it as a rental?
I mean, based on the number, I didn't ask, but based on the rent rates and the value of the property, I don't see how it could have been done as a rental. But
Mhm.
that's a long way to say I don't know what his end strategy was. I assume he was going to flip it.
Yeah, yeah. And you never know on the rental. For me and we've got pretty strict margins and what we want on our returns.
Hmm.
But there's so many, and which is why wholesaling became so popular. There's so many landlords out there that they're okay having a lot of money stuck in deals just to park their cash and get a decent return. One of my first flips in Houston, in Sugarland, when we sold it, this was 2013, 2014, something like that. So when we sold this property, it was in Sugarland, Texas. Um, and we got multiple offers. First weekend sold it was like 240,000 at the time. Going back, so back then, that same property is probably 350, 400,000 today. It was an all cash deal, and I just think, okay, some family they just bought it to live in it. No, they bought it as an investment, and it was strange. It was fully remodeled, gorgeous home. They bought it as a rental property. You never know. You never know. What were some like lessons learned from this particular deal?
Um, well, lessons learned are it's super important to have good people to call when you run into issues that you haven't dealt with before. Like I had already mentioned with Brant and Gerard helping through the 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 condition issues that I'd never worked through before, and just being willing to work through the process because, like I mentioned, the seller was in Washington, so it took probably 3 months from first contact to get the property to closing just because there were a lot of communication. So I guess being patient in the process when you're working with someone that is living in another town and understanding that there's probably going to need to be a lot of communication back and forth
Yeah,
um, in these types of situations.
love it, love it. What advice would you have for someone who is looking at this and they're thinking that they would like to do something like this? They would like to buy a property knowing that they could, or go out there and invest in real estate and have multiple exit strategies. Maybe they can get a $35,000 assignment fee. What advice do you have for that person?
I mean, the most important advice always is to have a good team around you so that as you're working through the deal, you have good people to call that can give you advice so that you can make sure that you put the deal together in a way that is going to lead to success.
Love it. Love it. All right. Thank you so much, Gary. So if you have questions for Gary, you can put them in the comments, and he's in the community. So if you're in the Wealth Passage community, if you got an account, which you do, if you're watching this, leave him a comment and ask a question. Gary pops in every once in a while and might get your question answered directly from Gary himself. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. I love seeing these stories. I've highlighted some other prior ones you've had. It seems like all your wholesale deals are over 30,000, which is amazing. But I know you do a lot more than that. Maybe next time we'll break down one of these owners finance deals that you've been doing a lot of lately. So otherwise, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you, Chris.